She doesn't text first. She doesn't chase. She doesn't try to make anyone stay. And that's exactly why men can't leave. Sounds irrational? It is. And that's why you need to watch this video till the end. There's something women do without even knowing they're doing it. And when it happens, men lose control of their emotions, not because they're weak, not because they've been fooled, but because something ancient kicks in. Biology, dopamine, obsession, and the twist? She has no idea it's happening. This isn't about flirting. It's not surface-level attraction. It's the kind of pull that lingers, even when there's nothing left to hold on to. In part 3 of this video, you'll understand why the less she says, the more he remembers. Why silence, when used right, is more powerful than attention. And by the end, you won't just understand her, you'll see yourself through a completely different lens. She doesn't text first because she needs no validation. She doesn't try to be mysterious. And still, she's the one who keeps men up at night. And the moment you think you figured her out, you realize you haven't. In this video, you'll see how women unconsciously trigger the deepest male attraction, why uncertainty becomes obsession, and why doing nothing, when done right, makes her unforgettable. If any of this resonates, keep it, rewatch it, send it to someone, especially if you know a woman who never had to try and was still impossible to forget. And if you are that kind of woman, you don't need this video to prove it. But if someone once walked away and came back, now you know why. 1. She doesn't reply right away. She doesn't text back immediately, not because she's busy, not because she's playing games, and definitely not because she's testing you. She simply doesn't live to react. When you send a message, you expect a response. When you take initiative, you want confirmation. But to her, your waiting isn't something she feels responsible for, because she doesn't build her life around anyone else's presence. And that's exactly why men can't walk away. A study published in Psychological Science, Whitchurch, Wilson, and Gilbert, 2010, found men are more drawn to women whose feelings are unclear. The less certainty, the more thought. The more thought, the deeper the pull. It's biology, not attitude. Not replying fast, it triggers obsession. She doesn't need silence to get attention. Her stillness alone is what makes you notice. A woman who replies slowly isn't being proud. She simply knows this. Real value never rushes. True attraction doesn't come from constant presence. It comes from the space she leaves behind, where your mind starts to wander, where your imagination starts to fill in the blanks. And when she creates that space, without even trying, you begin to worry. You begin to wonder if you're interesting enough. You begin to chase an attention that was never actually taken from you. It's not her silence. It's your unfamiliarity with stillness that needs no explanation. She doesn't rush because she doesn't need to compete. She's not afraid to lose you because true value fears no absence. In a world where people reply in 3 seconds flat, she's the one who makes you wait. And somehow it still feels worth it. But you think that's the end? It's not. That's just the first layer. Because what truly pulls men in deeper isn't just her calm, it's her distance. She has her own world, and she's not inviting anyone in. 2, she has a world of her own, and no one is automatically invited in. She doesn't overshare. She doesn't post stories to spark reactions. She doesn't speak in hints, hoping someone will decode her. She doesn't live to be understood. She lives to stay whole within herself. You see her presence, but never feel her cling. You feel her near, but she's never easy to reach. Everything about her is like a gently closed door, not locked, but never opened by default. She has a world of her own, and no one is entitled to enter. That world has limits, it has order, and it holds one truth. You are not the center of it, even if you matter. You're not flirting with a woman, you're standing before an ecosystem, with rules, with depth, with boundaries. And once you understand that, you stop trying to invade her world. You begin to wonder, am I quiet enough to be invited in? Why are men drawn to her? Because instinct isn't triggered by what's available. It's awakened by boundaries. A Harvard study once revealed the male dopamine system responds more strongly to rewards that are uncertain than to those readily available. Harvard Gazette, 2007. In simple terms, what you don't yet have consumes more of your mind than what's already in your hands. And she is the boundary in human form. She doesn't need you. She doesn't rely on your attention. She doesn't adjust her rhythm just because someone new showed up. Not because she's cold, but because she once fell apart and had to put herself back together. She used to long to be understood until she realized value doesn't come from being understood. It comes from being yourself, even when no one understands. A woman with depth doesn't search for someone to understand her. She watches to see who's still enough to feel what hasn't been said. And the more you try to read her, the more elusive she becomes. The more you ask, the further she steps back. Because peace in her world doesn't welcome noise, and her silence rejects urgency. She is a place not everyone gets in, and even fewer get to stay. But the most striking thing, she doesn't need you to understand her, because your inability to do so is exactly what makes her a mystery you can't stop chasing. She doesn't try to be understood. She chooses to be unreadable, and that is where we begin the next part. 3. She doesn't want to be understood. She chooses to be unpredictable. She doesn't over-explain. No defending, no justifying, no need to clarify who she is. She doesn't need to be understood. She chooses to keep the deepest parts of herself for the one calm enough to feel them. You ask what's on her mind. She just smiles, not hiding, but not in a rush to let you in either, because she knows something. The easier something is to understand, the easier it is to dismiss. She doesn't stay quiet to manipulate. She stays quiet because she doesn't need words to prove her worth. And that's when you start wondering, why was she warm yesterday, cold today? Why does she listen, but doesn't always reply? You don't have answers, just this feeling. The less you understand, the less you can walk away. Because male instinct isn't drawn to what's obvious. It's drawn to what keeps him asking questions and chasing answers on his own. A study from the University of Virginia found people bond more deeply with uncertain emotional connections. In other words, ambiguity sticks in the mind. She knows that, but she doesn't use it. She simply refuses to become predictable. Because anything predictable eventually becomes replaceable. A strong woman doesn't hide. She just doesn't hand herself over to someone who isn't still enough to hold her. She's like the ocean, sometimes calm, sometimes crashing, but always vast and always deep. You think you understand her, but every time you do, she shifts to another layer. Not to escape, but to remind you, she's not meant to be decoded. She's meant to be accepted, one layer at a time. And if you've stayed through this part, you'll understand why men forget all the women they understood, but never forget the one they never truly could. She's not playing hard to get. She just chooses not to lay it all on the table. Because depth can't be borrowed. It can only be given to someone still enough to receive it. Think you figured her out? Be careful, because the moment you think you understand, she's already gone. No noise, no explanation, no looking back. And by the time you finally understand her, she's become the one who no longer needs to be understood, because she walks away as if she never needed to hold anyone close to begin with. 4. She walked away without looking back. She may have loved you. She may have waited. She may have bent her rhythm just a little for you. But once the line is crossed, she walks. No warning, no blame, no glance over the shoulder. Not because she's cold, not because she wants you to hurt, and definitely not to make you regret and come running back. She walks because staying would mean losing herself. That's what most men don't understand. They think her silence is passive, that her calm is compliance, but no, that calm is a decision. And when she chooses to walk away in silence, it means you're no longer part of her inner world. She doesn't say much. She doesn't cry out. She doesn't post cryptic captions. She doesn't text, "Do you still love me?" She just disappears. The woman who walks away in silence is the one who fought the hardest within herself, and you don't realize it until it's too late. You realize it when your messages stop getting the seen, when your stories fall flat because no one's really listening anymore, when you stir the pot and she doesn't react because the fire's out, not for lack of flames, but because she's learned to keep herself warm. And if you've ever been left in silence, stay until the end of this, because you'll understand why she never came back. Not because you're terrible, but because she is no longer the same woman. A woman who once invited you into her world doesn't take that back lightly, but once she sees that you no longer deserve to be there, she walks and she doesn't look back. You think she's waiting for you to realize your mistake? She's not. She's already moving forward toward the only thing that matters now, herself. Her greatest power isn't in how she held on. It's in how she let go, without letting go of who she is. No one learns to walk away without pain. She didn't either, but she learned this. The deepest pain is staying in a place where you no longer recognize yourself. And she chose not to feel that. She chose peace over staying. She chose to walk, rather than beg for something already gone. You won't miss her for how she loved. You'll miss her for the silence she left behind. When you were still there and she was already gone. You think she needed you to feel whole? You were allowed to be next to her because you matched the wholeness she already had. She walked away without looking back, not because you were unworthy, but because she knew she was worth more. And the strange part, she didn't need to be stunning, didn't need to stand out, didn't need every eye in the room. And still, you'll never forget her because she never needed to be beautiful, to be unforgettable. 5. She doesn't need to be beautiful to be irresistible. She's not the most stunning woman in the room, not the type who turns every head, not the one that fits everyone's idea of striking. And yet, there's something about her that makes it impossible to look away. It's not the makeup, not the outfit, not the body proportions. It's the energy. You feel her before you see her. She walks in, not trying to stand out, but the entire room shifts. No one can quite explain it, but everyone senses it. Someone just arrived. She doesn't need to be beautiful because she radiates an attraction that doesn't depend on sight. It comes from her state of being. When a woman doesn't try to impress, she ends up being the most impressive. When she doesn't try to be special, she becomes the one you can't stop watching, even when she says nothing. Because attraction isn't born from how someone looks. It's born from how someone makes you feel. There are people you find beautiful and forget, and there are people you never forget, even when you can't explain why. According to research from Harvard Medical School, 2003, the brain responds more intensely to nonverbal signals, like self-possession, steady eye contact, and open body language, than to isolated features like lips or cheekbones. In other words, it's not her lipstick that draws you in, it's her internal state, expressed effortlessly on the outside, and she is that state. She doesn't force a smile to seem approachable. She doesn't talk too much to be noticed. She doesn't try to be feminine or cool by anyone's definition. She just is, fully, unapologetically. And that is what pulls people in. You can't learn to be attractive like her because she's not performing it. She embodies it. She doesn't need to be beautiful because what you notice in her isn't on the surface. It's in the deeper layer of energy. A calm that doesn't need to be explained. A gaze that doesn't need effort. A stillness that makes others stop in their tracks. You know what makes people never forget her? It's when you've already walked away and you still feel like she's watching, not in a controlling way, but in the sense that you're still within the awareness of someone who doesn't get shaken easily. That's not seduction, that's presence. And it might take you years to understand. She never had to be beautiful because what held you there was never what your eyes could see. She didn't need to make you fall. She just needed to stay unmoved by you. And that is what kept you coming back. Attraction doesn't come from having more. It comes from needing less to still be whole. She could walk away, go silent, vanish from your world, and you'd still remember her. Not because of how she looked, but because of how she felt. And that is real power. Because true attraction isn't created through effort. It flows from an unshakable presence. And that's when you realize you never actually forgot her. Because that woman never had to try to be remembered. And what you're about to hear next will tie together everything she truly is. In the end, she didn't have to do anything, and that's exactly why you can't forget her. You've met women who made you laugh. Some made you happy. Others, they hurt you. But then there's a kind of woman who did nothing at all and still never left your mind. It wasn't because she stood out. It wasn't because she was always right. It wasn't because she was easy to be around. It was because she was complete in her silence, grounded in her choices, and whole within her own space. She didn't chase the spotlight. She didn't try to be seen. She didn't need applause to validate her presence. And that's why every gaze found its way to her. In a world where people scream to be noticed, she chose stillness, not because she was shy, but because she didn't need to be seen to know her worth. And what makes you remember her the most? Not a memory, not a gesture, not even a single word, but a feeling you can't name, but you know it's real. The feeling that when she was near, you didn't have to try to be anyone. And the feeling that if she ever walked away, you'd lose something you'll never find again. You thought you knew her, thought she'd always be there, assumed that if you left, she'd stay. But she didn't. She walked away without looking back. And when you looked around, no one else gave you that same feeling. Because the most magnetic thing about a woman isn't how she holds on. It's how she's willing to let go without losing herself. You can't buy that. You can't copy it. You can't rush learn it in a few weeks. Because it's not about what she does. It's about who she's become. If you've ever met a woman like that, don't try to hold her. Ask yourself, am I strong enough now to not make her leave again? And if you are that kind of woman, don't doubt yourself. Don't trade your depth for temporary closeness. You don't need to be understood. You deserve to be respected. She doesn't try to shine, but in her stillness, she makes everything else feel loud. If this video stirred something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Save it. Share it with the one who never left your mind. Drop a comment. What part of this video stayed with you the most? Because this video isn't for everyone. It's for those who are awake enough to know value doesn't come from speaking louder, but from the presence that doesn't need to speak at all. See you in the next video. But if she's like the woman you just heard about, you might not get a second chance to see her again.